Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. It is Thursday night. I was going to say Tuesday. I was going to say Tuesday because we originally had the book club on Tuesdays, but we moved it back to Thursdays. So it is Thursday night, November 30th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Thursday nights moving forward, we will continue with our book club. So we are still on Nosso by Chico Xavier, which is one of his many books, because he wrote a lot, one of his many books about the afterlife, right? And so this was a book where he channeled the spirit Andre Luis and was basically informed of what the afterlife is like from the perspective of Andre Luis. And so we are on chapter 24 today. If you are new to this channel, first of all, welcome. I hope you like, comment, share, and subscribe. But if you're new to this channel, every Thursday night now, we do a book club where we pick a book from a spiritual tradition and we deep dive. We read the whole book together, and there's a lot of commentary, there's questions that are answered, etc., etc. And up to this point, we have done, hey, Lucianne, my stalker, she's so cute. We have done the subject of spiritualism, spiritism, and espiritismo, right? So of course, we started with the first 3 of 5 books from Allan Kardec, right? The codices. And so we did the spirits book, we did the mediums book, and we did the gospel according to spiritism. We didn't do the other 2, and that's okay. I'm going to leave that up to you. And if you feel like you need to go back and catch up, just go to my YouTube and watch them all. But now we are on a new author, still within the realm of spiritualism, spiritism, and espiritismo. But this time we are talking about an author named Chico Xavier, who is from Brazil, and he's kind of like the Allan Kardec of Brazil, if that makes sense. And he wrote numerous amounts of books. And he was a medium himself, one of the greatest mediums in history, and he was dictated. He dictated these books from these spirits that he had, channeled. So this book right now is called Nosso. And like I had mentioned, it's about the afterlife from the perspective of a spirit named Andre Luis, who is a doctor. And we are currently on chapter 24. Now, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to jump in the middle of this book, I don't know what's going on, don't stress it. I promise you, the commentary and the discussions, that the little side conversations we end up having about what we're reading, is worth more than you would imagine. So just stick around. Okay. So chapter 24 is going to be shared with you right now. Let me just share my screen real quick. Do, 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 do. Okay. Why is this? I don't understand why this never works. Why this share screen never works. I don't get it. This happened to us the last round and makes me want to pull my hair out, you guys. Let's see what's up with that. Let me just try one more time up here. See if that'll do anything. Oh, I see. Here's one. Okay. Give me a second while I figure this out. Don't know what isn't working. I'm going to try my best. You're such an asshole. Okay. There we go. There we go. And let me just do this really quick. There we are. And we're moving that over here. We're getting this over there. And boom. Can you guys see that? Did I fix it? Tell me if you can see it. Hey, Serenity. What up, girl? Tell me if you guys can see the screen now. Ugh. Dumb screens. All right. All right, here we go. Soft music floated into the room, soothing us with its melodious cadence. And while on the screen we saw the announcer in his studio, in a few moments he began to speak. This is Station 2, residents. Our colony continues to broadcast its appeal for peace on Earth. We urge all workers of goodwill to muster their energy to help maintain the moral balance on the Earth. Please, all who can spare a few hours to cooperate in the broader zones that connect the dark forces of the lower zones to the human mind, help us. Dark bands of ignorant entities, after having left a bloody trial of war in Asia, are laying siege to the European nations, urging them on to new crimes. Our colony, together with all those dedicated to the work of spiritual hygiene in the spheres nearest to the earth, denounce this onset of the concentrated powers of evil and request brotherly collaboration and all possible help. Remember that the cause of peace needs defenders. Join in and cooperate with us to the best of your abilities. There is work for everyone, from the regions of the earth to our very gates. May the Lord bless us. That's my dog, you guys. I apologize. He is a loud little one. So the voice silenced, and again I heard the celestial melody. The impressive tones of that call stirred to my very soul, and Lysias hastened to my aid with his usual explanations. We are listening to residents, an old colony closely connected with the lower zones. And as you know, it is August of 1939. All the suffering you have gone through lately has left you little time to ponder the grave situation on Earth. But you can see that the Earth's nations are facing the imminent threat of a tremendous war. Please pause. Please pause. This is one of the reasons, by the way, you guys, that this book ended up going down in history as one of the greatest pieces of evidence that it was real. And right here, where it says, it is August of 1939. And the announcer on this little cute little radio show that's in the afterlife is basically saying there was a war that happened in Asia, a lot of evil energies that died during that war are now whispering in the ears of European nations, causing them to do fucked up things, which will then ensue and result in another war. And all of this is happening in 1939, which is around the time that we start to see a lot of tumultuous things happening in Europe. We start to also see the rise of certain dictators happening in Europe. All of this was happening and is being explained to the medium, Chico Xavier, by the afterlife as to how this is going to pan out if things don't like change, right? And so the whole purpose of this radio show is to kind of let all of the other colonies in the afterlife, to let them know, like, hey, we need you guys to get on board. We need you guys to start sending your spiritual fluids, sending your spiritual healing energies, sending your positive energies down to earth, and try your best to like mitigate this situation because it's going to get wild, right? Really? I asked, awed. But wasn't there enough bloodshed in the last World War? And Lysias smiled and looked at me in silence as if lamenting the gravity of the problem. It was the first time he did not respond to my question. His silence was strange. The immensity of the spiritual services in my new plane of life overwhelmed me. Were there cities of generous spirits asking for assistance and cooperation? The voice of the speaker was presented in the tone of an SOS. His rundown appearance showed on our screen, and his disquieted eyes betrayed his deep anxiety. And the language, I distinctly heard him speak in clear, correct Portuguese. I had thought that all the spiritual colonies communicated through thought vibrations. Were there then such great difficulties in the interchange? Seeing my bewilderment, Lysias explained. We are still far from an ideal region of the mind. As on earth, those who are in perfect harmony with each other may communicate through thoughts without any of the barriers of speech. But generally, we cannot dispense with the linguistic form in a broad sense. Our area of battle is immeasurable. Earthly humanity, made up of millions of beings, is united with the invisible humanity of the planet, which numbers in the billions. It would be impossible to reach the more perfect zones right after physical death. Our national and linguistic heritage remain with us, and our thoughts are restricted within our psychic bodies. Now, in different sectors of our activities, there are great numbers of spirits free from all of those limitations, but we mustn't forget that nothing escapes the principles of sequence at work in the laws of evolution. Mm. Meanwhile, the music stopped and the speaker returned. This is Residence, Station 2. The colony continues to broadcast its appeal on behalf of peace on Earth. Dark clouds are gathering over the skies of Europe. Forces of darkness from the lower zones, attracted by the base tendencies of mankind, are spreading in all directions. Devoted benefactors are stationed in political offices, struggling and making great sacrifices on behalf of international harmony. Some governments, however, are too centralized and offer few possibilities for spiritual collaboration. These countries, deprived of serene and dispassionate counsel, are moving towards a great and terrible war. O beloved brothers of the higher spheres, let us help to preserve peace on earth. Let us help to defend centuries of experience of the numerous centers of Western civilization, and may the Lord bless us. And after a short silence, I did not dare speak. After 5 minutes of the shooting music, the voice continued. This is Residence, Station 2. The colony continues to broadcast its appeal on behalf of peace on earth. Fellow workers and brothers, let us invoke the protection of the powerful fraternities of light which preside over the destinies of America. Help us in the preservation of ancient rescue of the defenseless communities. Let us sustain the anguished hearts of countless mothers. All our forces are concentrated on the tremendous fight against the legions of ignorance. Give us all the help you can. We are the invisible part of earthly humankind, and many of us will soon return to the physical sphere to make restitution for our past errors. Incarnate humanity is also our family. Let us all unite in one single vibration. We must check the advance of darkness with floods of light, and ward off the blows of evil with the shield of good. Rivers of blood and tears are threatening to flow over the fields of Europe. Let us proclaim the necessity of constructive work and expand our faith. May the Lord bless us. And the broadcast was over, and Lysias turned off the receiver. I saw him discreetly away, a tear which he could not hold back. With an expressive gesture, he exclaimed, "What devoted workers our brothers of Residence are! However," he added sadly with a pause, "everything will be useless. Soon earthly humanity will be facing tremendous suffering." "But is there no possibility of averting the catastrophe?" I asked, greatly moved. "Unfortunately," replied Lysias in a grave tone of voice, "the general statement of affairs is exceedingly critical. In answer to the appeals of Residence, and the other colonies working in the neighborhood of the lower zones. Several meetings were held here, but the Ministry of Divine Union has already warned us that war is unavoidable because incarnate humanity, taken collectively, is like an insatiable person who has overeaten at a banquet. The organic crisis which follows is inevitable. Various nations have had an orgy of criminal pride and boastfulness and ferocious selfishness. Now they are experiencing the urgent need to expel these lethal poisons. Whew! Anxious to drop the painful subject, Lysias invites me to retire. So, yeah, that was kind of hard to hear because we're kind of in the middle of it right now with what's going on, all the world, Palestine, Congo. I mean, it's all over the place right now. But he says something really interesting in this chapter. He says that it's as if mankind was at a buffet, just bull greed, violence. They were indulging in all of the harmful and negative activities. Now the position we have to purge all of it out, to all back out. In order to do that, it manifests like war. You do it to your neighbor. You can't help. That's the next sequence. That's the consequence of stuffing yourself at a banquet. Now you got to go take a shit. But guess who's in the toilet? All the rest of us. And so, it's one of those things where the spirits are saying, look, as much as this announcer is trying his best to kind of rally up the troops and get everyone on board with sending positivity down to earth and really trying to help out where we can, the reality is that this war is going to happen, and this war is going to happen because humanity has been indulging in these types of behaviors for so long now that it is only part of the natural consequence that it's going to spill out into these types of behaviors, which is going to be warlike behaviors. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. So that chapter is over. We're now on chapter 25, and it's entitled A Generous Initiative. Early the following morning, we shared a light meal in Lysias's home. As her children were about to take their leave and go off to their jobs, Laura announced to me cheerfully, I have arranged company for you today. Raphael, an old friend of ours who works at the Ministry of Regeneration, will call for you at my request, and you may accompany him to the ministry, and there he will introduce you to the minister Genesius in my name. I could find no words to express my gratitude. I was radiant. Lysias was also pleased and embraced me warmly on leaving. On kissing her son goodbye, Laura recommended that Lysias tell the minister Clarence that she would be along as soon as Raphael came for me. Her generosity touched me deeply, leaving me tongue-tied with emotion. When we were alone, my devoted hostess addressed me kindly. My brother, new paths are opening to you today. And since your mother doesn't live with us here in the astral city, I hope you won't mind my taking her place in this moment to offer you a little motherly advice. Indeed, I am most grateful, I exclaimed, moved. I shall never be able to express the extent of my appreciation for your kindness. Laura smiled and added, I heard that you asked for some work some time ago. Yes, I did. I agreed, remembering Clarence's words on the subject. I also know that you didn't obtain it then, but instead were given permission to visit different ministries which connect us more with the earth. It is in this regard that pleading my greater experience, I would like to offer you a few suggestions. Now that you are finally allowed to frequent different departments of work as a preliminary stage of apprenticeship, try to curb as much as possible all impulses of mere curiosity. Don't be like a moth fluttering about from light to light. Pause. Let's pause. Let's pause here. Let's pause here for a second, you guys, please. I need every single person who's in this live right now. I need every single person who's living, who's watching this video right now to listen to these last two statements, please. Try to curb as much as possible all impulses of mere curiosity. Don't be like a moth fluttering from light to light. Please listen to that. Please integrate that, and please follow suit, because there's just nothing more infuriating that I've experienced and observed within the spiritual community than watching someone who is just insatiable with regards to wanting to learn everything and anything they possibly can get their hands on with spiritual practices, as opposed to taking the time to commit yourself to one particular thing and learning that one particular thing thoroughly before moving on. And instead, what we see in our spiritual community is a lot of surface level preachers, people who know a little bit about everything, You look foolish. You look stupid. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that, please. Trust me when I tell you, you have time. Trust me when I tell you, the learning of this stuff takes lifetimes. Lifetimes. You will not learn it all in one lifetime. You will not. So accept that. Be okay with that. Find yourself a few things that you are interested in and deep dive hard into those things. And I promise you, you will be so much better off. So much better off. Okay, back to the book. I realize that the sense of intellectual search is a very strong one in you. And as a studious physician, always in quest of new discoveries and problems, it wouldn't be difficult in your present position to drift along undesirable channels. Remember that there are many lessons to be learned, far more precious and beneficial than mere analysis of things. Even a healthy curiosity may, at times, be dangerous. Resolute, loyal spirits may overcome these obstacles and accomplish edifying tasks, but the timid and inexperienced ones may encounter pain and bitterness. The reason why she's saying this, the timid and inexperienced ones, the reason why she's saying this is because there is a certain level of, there's a certain level of, I don't want to say foolishness, but naivety. Naivety would be a better word. There's a certain level of naivety that accompanies someone who might be a little bit too open to everything, right? I always tell people, I'm like, it's great to be open. It's great to be curious. It's great to ask questions. Listen, I am that bitch. 150,000%. I am always like, why, all the time. I'm always researching stuff. I'm always looking, always, right? But there's a certain level of naivety that accompanies that type of personality, and that naivety can be very dangerous, because there are spirits out there who will look at you and say, ooh, this one is open. This one's really open. And they will come in and they will fuck it all up for you, and they will confuse you, and they will cause a lot of turmoil internally. And this can lead to a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. And then, of course, in that, while that's all happening, your need to want to know things isn't just for you. It becomes a situation where you want to know things so that you can keep up with the Joneses. It becomes a situation where you start to compare yourself to others' knowledge, and in that, as a result of that, bitterness can ensue. Okay, so it's just important to, really what they're really saying here is, if you find something that you're interested in, stick with it, commit to it until you've learned it thoroughly. Okay, don't be flaky about the thing. So Clarence has offered you a permit to visit the ministries, beginning with regeneration. So instead of giving vent to your curiosity, Study the different lines of activities with searching attention and lend a willing hand at the first opportunity should you be offered a chance to render a service, however humble, in this ministry. Don't worry about acquainting yourself with the routine of the other ministries. Try to gain the goodwill of all those around you, bearing in mind that the spirit of investigation should always be second to the spirit of service. The spirit of investigation should always be second to the spirit of service. Again, listen to that, integrate that, believe that, live that. Because there is no greater teacher of spiritual truth than the teacher of service. No greater teacher. I don't care how many books you read. I don't care how many elders you have. I don't care how many titles you have. There is no greater teacher of how the spirit works and how the spirit moves than through service. For sure. I agree with that 1000%. To pry into one's neighbor's occupations without possessing the due credentials of good service might be considered a great impertinence. Numerous failures in material achievements have their roots in such anomalies. Everyone is ready to be a spectator, yet rare are those willing to accomplish something. Woo! This bitch is reading everybody for filth right now. Nothing but edifying work endows the spirit with the indispensable merit to claim any new prerogatives. Meaning, all the books that you read, all the research that you do, does not give you license to speak on or represent any particular subject. Only service, only hard work, only getting your hands dirty will allow you the right to have an attitude, the right to have this prerogative, the right to have this, right? Because up to this point, you're just a spectator. You're just someone who does a lot of reading, someone who does a lot of thinking, someone who does a lot of talking, but you're not actually producing any. You're not willing to accomplish anything. You're not willing to sacrifice, willing to do work. And in the eyes of spirit, I mean, yeah, what are you doing? So there's plenty of hard work in the ministry of generation because this region of spiritual calling is located. All groups, generous entities entrusted with the most arduous missions are recruited from a working staff. Those low tasks are no way humiliating. Remember, in all our planes, from the earth to the highest spheres in the most spiritually evolved zones, in relation to the planet Earth, the greatest worker is the Master Jesus himself, and he wasn't ashamed to wield a heavy saw in a carpenter's shop. Minister Clarence has kindly allowed you to learn, analyze, and appreciate these values, but you may, as a wise worker, convert this period of observation into a stage of useful service. Those in authority may justly refuse a request for some special line of work whose practice is legitimately reserved for those who are duly qualified for it through great efforts and much suffering, but they will most certainly accept cooperation of the spirit of goodwill from those anxious to serve in any capacity. These words, spoken in an affectionate motherly voice, sank into my heart like a soothing balm. Seldom in my life had I met such a deep brotherly interest for my fate. Deeply affected by this wise exhortation, I listened with moist eyes. As if anxious to temper the seriousness of her warning, Laura added encouragingly, "The ability to begin anew is one of the most sublime lessons we may learn. Very few, indeed, are those who fully understand it, and extremely rare are the incarnate men who distinguish themselves in that line. We must remember, however, the name of Paul of Tarsus, a learned member of the Synodon, and the hope of his people, and enjoying an enviable position in Jerusalem, one day retired into the desert to begin his human experience again as a humble weaver. I could no longer contain myself and took both of her hands in mine like a son and covered them with my grateful tears. Lysias's mother, gazing into the distance, spoke softly. I am also grateful, my brother. I believe you weren't brought into this house by a blind stroke of fate. We are all bound by secular ties of affection. I shall soon return to the physical sphere, but we shall continue united by the bonds of our hearts, and I hope to see you busy and happy before my departure. Please remember that this house is your home. Work with good cheer and put your trust in God. I raised my eyes to her kind face and experienced the joy that is born of a pure spiritual friendship. I had the impression of having known her as a devoted friend for a long time, although I tried in vain to place her among my earliest recollections. Grateful, I felt like kissing her again and again, but just then there was a knock at the door. And with a look of maternal affection, Laura said, "It must be Raphael coming for you. Go now, my friend, and think of Jesus. Work hard for the good of others. It is the only way of finding your own." Ooh, that chapter was serious. Serious. Mm. So now we're on chapter 26, entitled New Perspectives. Turning over the wise suggestions of Lysias's mother in my mind, I left with Raphael, certain that I was about to begin not the prospective visits of observation, but a term of apprenticeship and useful service. I noted with surprise the imposing beauty of the new district we passed through on our way to where I was to be introduced to the minister Genesius. I was not in my usual inquisitive mood. I experienced instead a form of mental activity which was new to me, and I followed Raphael in silence. Raptured in fervent prayer, I besought Jesus to assist me in these new ways. Sorry, I had to burp. In these new ways, so that I might not lack work and the strength to accomplish it. Adverse as I had formerly been to the practice of prayer, I now turned to it as a valuable sentimental mainstay to my determination to serve. From time to time, Raphael cast a curious look at me, as if he did not expect such an attitude on my part. The airbus stopped in front of a large building, and we descended in silence. In a few minutes, we were shown into the minister's office. Genesius was an affable old man, whose countenance revealed uncommon energy. Raphael introduced me kindly. "Oh, yes," said the great gracious minister. "So this is our brother Andre." "At your service," I answered. "Laura has told me about your coming. Please don't stand upon ceremony." Meanwhile, Raphael respectfully took his leave and gave me an encouraging handshake. He left hurriedly, as he was urgently expected at his work. Genesius then turned his clear eyes to me and said, "Clarence has already mentioned you with interest. The Ministry of Assistance frequently sends us groups of its residents on visits of observation, which, as a rule, are transformed into periods of service." I understood this subtle allusion and replied, "Well, that's exactly what I greatly desired. I have prayed for the divine forces to assist my feeble spirit so that my stay in this ministry might also be converted into a period of apprenticeship." My words seemed to have touched Genesius. Therefore, availing myself of the moment, I begged him, "Worthy minister, I realize now that my passage through the ministry of assistance was due exclusively to God's mercy, perhaps in answer to my devoted mother's constant intercessions. But I also realize that up to this present moment, I have received innumerable benefits without offering the least useful retribution. Surely my place is here amidst the redeeming activities. Please, if possible, let my permission to visit be transformed into the possibility to serve. Now I understand as never before the urgent necessity of redeeming myself. I have wasted too much time in useless vanities and misspent a tremendous amount of energy in ridiculous self worship. He noticed that I was speaking sincerely, and when I had asked Clarence for work, I was not yet clear on what I wanted. I had certainly wanted to work, but perhaps not to serve. I had not yet realized the value of time or learned to appreciate the sublime blessing of opportunity. I suppose the truth of it was that I really wished to continue being what I had been until then, the proud and respected physician, a slave to my preposterous claims of self imprisoned within my own opinions. Now, after all I had seen and heard, and realizing the responsibility of each child of God in the infinite scheme of creation, I gave utterance to the best there was in me. At last I was sincere. I was not in the least worried about the kind of work I was to do, but really anxious to carry it out in the sublime spirit of service. He looked at me with questioning eyes. Are you really a former doctor? Yes, I am, I answered timidly. Genesius was silent for some time before speaking, as if adjusting himself to my unexpected attitude. Your resolutions are most praiseworthy, he said at last. May the Lord help you to adhere to them. And as if anxious to raise my spirit with new hope, he continued, when the disciple is ready, the Father sends the Master. The same occurs with work. When one is willing to serve, he never lacks opportunities. Listen to that again, you guys. When one is willing to serve, he never lacks opportunities. If you find yourself unlucky in work, unlucky in finances, unlucky in all of these areas of opportunity, it is because you're thinking too much about yourself and your needs, and you need to start thinking about others. You need to start serving. And the doors will fly right open. And that is a fact. That one line is probably the only thing you could take out of this book that is like 1000% true. In your case, my friend, divine providence has been extremely generous. You are eager to serve, you understand your responsibility and accept your duty. Such attitude is undoubtedly leading you to the accomplishment of your wishes. On the physical plane, many applaud the person who attains financial prosperity or an outstanding position. Here, however, the case is different. To us, comprehension, effort, and sincere humility are the things that really matter. Sensing my anxious expectation, he added, it's quite possible for you to obtain work. However, for the time being, it would be wiser for you to frequent our numerous departments and to observe and study their different activities. He then contacted the next office, saying aloud, I should like to see you. I should like to see Tobias before he goes down to the chambers of rectification. And then in a few minutes, a gentleman with pleasant manners came into the room. Tobias, exclaimed Genesius courteously. Here is a friend who came from the Ministry of Assistance for a period of observation. I believe a visit to the chambers of rectification would be greatly beneficial to him. I offered the newcomer my hand, which he grasped firmly, saying humbly, at your service. Take it with you, continued the minister kindly. I must become thoroughly acquainted with our activities. He sees that he is granted every available opportunity. I am on my way now, Dias added urgingly, if you wish to accompany me. Certainly, I answered eagerly. I took my leave of the minister, who addressed with further admiring word of encouragement. Then I resolutely followed Tobias, and together we walked along great city blocks, whose numerous buildings gave me the impression of busy centers of work, Perceiving my silent questions, my new friend informed, "These are the great plants of the astral city. Here, over 100,000 spirits are employed in the preparation of juices and in the manufacture of woven goods and all kinds of commodities, while working at the same time at their own rehabilitation and enlightenment." A few minutes, we entered an imposing building. After crossing long galleries where numerous workers hurried to and from, we came to a monumental stairway leading to the lower floors. "Let us descend," said Tobias gravely. Noting my surprise, he added solicitously, "The chambers of rectification are located closer to the lower zones. On first arriving in the astral city, the unfortunate entities who are lodged here cannot bear either light or open air." Whew. What time is it? Oh, good, we got time. Chapter 27, Work at Last. Hmm. Never could I have pictured the scene now before my eyes. It was neither hospital nor conventional nursing home, but a series of vast intercommunicating wards crowded with carcasses like human forms. A strange clamoring filled the air. Groans, sobs, plaintive phrases uttered at random, ghastly faces, bony hands, and monstrous bore witness to their terrible spiritual misery. So upsetting were my first impressions that I had to resort to prayer to keep my strength. Tobias called an old nurse. "There are so few assistants today," he asked, surprised. "What has happened?" Minister Flaccus sent word that most of them were to accompany the Samaritans on their rounds to the regions of the lower zones. "Well, the Tobias decided calmly, we must fill the gaps. There is no time to waste." Brother Tobias, have mercy," cried out an old man, clutching the bed and gesticulating like a madman. "I am suffocating. This is 1,000 times worse than death on earth. Help! I want to leave this place, to get out. I must have air, more air." Tobias approached and examined him carefully and inquired, "Why is Ribeiro so much worse?" He was he had one of his worst crises, informed the nurse. Assistant conclaves attribute it chiefly to the heavy charge of dense thoughts emitted by his incarnate relations. As he is still very weak and lacks the mental strength to break away from his earthly ties, the poor creature has not been able to resist their influence. While Tobias gently stroked the patient's forehead, the nurse continued, "Early this morning, he rushed out of the ward crying loudly that he was needed at home, that he couldn't forget his wife and children, that it was cruel to keep him here away from them. Lawrence and Hermes tried in vain to bring him back to bed. Therefore, I thought that it would be in his best interest to take away his energy and mobility, which I did by applying some prostrating magnetic passes to him." I want you to take note here, by the way. So, we've talked about this before. Magnetic passes are one form of healing that espiritistas do, and it was taught to us by the spirits. However, if you notice here, she had to take away his energy and she had to take away his mobility through magnetic passes. So, in the same way that we can heal using magnetic passes, we can also debilitate using magnetic passes. So, please understand that. This is why people need training in magnetic passes. You can't just start doing that. You could gravely hurt somebody. "You did well," agreed Tobias thoughtfully. "I will see that measures are taken against the influence of his family's attitude. They must be given a greater share of worry so that they may leave Ribeiro in peace." Take note of this sentence, okay? If you notice, When family members, especially after someone passes away, when family members focus too much on the dead of especially someone who has recently passed, when they focus too much on them in a harmful way, meaning like, wishing and begging for them to come back, wishing and begging for them to make contact, wishing and begging for them to be near, which is a normal part of the grieving process, of course. But if not channeled to proper prayer, which helps elevate a spirit, it can inadvertently harm the spirit on the other side. By not channeling your desires about your deceased loved one into prayer, what you are essentially doing is you are trapping your loved ones by begging them to stay, by begging them to come back, by begging them to make contact, by begging them to be close, by begging them to give you a sign. Especially just after they passed, you're really doing much more harm than good to a spirit. Instead, take that energy and pray for the spirit to cross over and give that spirit light. The quicker that that happens, the better the chance that you will get the messages that you are seeking, that you will get the communication that you are seeking, that you will get the visitations that you are seeking. You just can't get it immediately after death. There is a transition period that needs to occur, and that transition period can be assisted by family members of a deceased loved one, or they can be hindered by family members of a deceased loved one. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because that's pretty much what they're trying to say here. And in order to rectify the problem, what they're going to do now, sadly, is they're going to now send distractions. They're going to send distractions to the family members. And those distractions might not necessarily be good ones. The distractions might be, a house burns down, a car breaks down, someone loses their job, blah, 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 blah. And all of those things happen in order to redirect the focus of the family members to that new problem so that they are no longer getting in the way of the progress of the spirit in the afterlife. I looked intensely at the patient, trying to determine his emotional state. He wore the typical expression of the mentally deranged and seemed utterly unconscious of what was being said about him. He called Tobias automatically, as do children who know their benefactor. My new instructor, noting my amazement, explained, "The poor thing is still in a nightmarish phase, during which the soul is wrapped up in its own afflictions, with little perception of anything else. Man, my friend reaps exactly what he has sown. Our poor Roberto has been a prey to numerous illusions." I wanted to ask about his history and the source of his sufferings, but remembering Laura's advice on curiosity, I kept my peace. Tobias addressed the patient with kind words of encouragement and hope, and promised he would see to the means of improving his condition, that for his own good he should calm down and take his confinement in bed patiently. Ribeiro, trembling pitiably and ghastly pale, smiled sadly and thanked him with tears in his eyes. We walked slowly along between numerous rows of well-kept beds. Unwholesome exaltations filled the place, caused, I later learned, by the mental emanations of those who were still under the painful impressions of physical death, or dominated by the low vibrations of inferior thoughts. These wards are used exclusively for male entities. "Tobias, Tobias, I am parched and starving," shouted a patient. "Help me, brother," yelled another patient. "For the love of God, I can't stand this any longer," cried out a third patient. My heart was heavy before so much suffering, and I could not help ask, "My friend, how sad it is to see all these sufferings and tormented spirits. Why must there exist such a dismal place?" And Tobias replied with perfect composure, "In observing this scene, you must try to see beyond the pain and isolation. Remember, brother, that these patients have already left the lower zones, where so many pitfalls lie in wait for those who have heedlessly neglected their spirit selves. In these chambers, patients are not only cared for, they are also prepared for their future redemption. We must bear in mind that their suffering is of their own doing. Man's life is always centered wherever his heart is. I hope you all heard that. Man's life is always centered wherever his heart is. Couldn't have said it better myself. And after a long pause during which seemed deaf to the clamoring sounds around us, he added, "They are smugglers of eternal life." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They expect mere earthly acquisitions to have the same value in the spirit spheres. They believed that criminal pleasures, the power of money, infringement of law, and the imposition of self would cross the frontiers of the spectacular and be in here, offering new opportunities for follies. They were thought businessmen who forgot to exchange their material acquisitions for spiritual currency. When in the flesh they traveled to foreign cities, they always cared to provide themselves with the currency of the country in which they visited. Yet, while certain of the inevitability of the final trip to their spiritual regions, they neglected to acquire spiritual values, and thus the millionaire of the physical sphere becomes the spiritual pauper." How true! Tobias' words could not have been more logical. After distributing comfort and hope, he leaded me to the next ward. Narcissia, the nurse, who followed us and deferentially opened the door. As I entered, I nearly staggered with heart-sickening surprise. It was a chamber of vast proportions, where 32 men with sinister countenances lay quite still on very low beds. Their almost unnoticeable breath was the only sign of life they presented. These unhappy entities are in a sleep much heavier than that of most of our ignorant brothers. We call them the negative believers, for instead of accepting the Lord, they were unconditional slaves of self. Instead of believing in life, action, and work, they admitted only the victory of crime, immobility, and eternal nothingness. They transformed their earthly experience into the constant preparation for a long slumber. And as they had no notion of good, of brotherly cooperation, there's nothing left for them now but to sleep on for years and years as helpless victims of ghastly nightmares. I was horrified at these explanations and stared at Tobias, who began to carefully apply strengthening passes on the patients. When the treatment on the first two was over, they both began vomiting a black substance, a dark, viscous matter with cadaverous emanations. "They are expelling the poisonous fluids," explained Tobias calmly. Narcissia was doing her best to keep up with the cleaning, but in vain, for by this time a great number of them had begun expelling the same dark, fetid matter. It was then that I instinctively got hold of the cleaning implements and set myself to work. The nurse seemed so thankful for my help, and Tobias threw me a glance that well expressed his satisfaction and gratitude. The work continued throughout the day, bringing with it a blessed fatigue. No friend in the physical world could possibly appreciate the sublime joy of the physician recommencing his self-education from the humblest of nursing tasks. Whoa. Whoa, you guys. So to quickly kind of go back when he was talking about the vomiting up of the black substance, please note that that is a real thing. We see that here in real life as well when we do healing work, spiritual healing work for our clients. There are many, many, many instances that after we've done healing work with our clients, they will vomit up black a very black viscous type of substance. It almost has the consistency of um no, it's not quite as gelatinous as egg yolk. It's but it's like a very liquidy kind of mucus from your nose, like when you're really sick and your nose is just like leaking out. It's similar to that, just a little bit more thick, and it's pure black. It's pure black. Like you would think that when you saw this vomiting up, you would think that they were dying, that they were vomiting up some type of organ or something, because it's just so, you're just not used to seeing that type of thing coming out of a body. But it does. It sure does. And it's usually the result of deeply, deeply, deeply embedded spiritual illnesses, that are a result of spiritual attachments. Um, and our people are in need of very deep purification rituals at that point. It's pretty uh, concerning when you see it for the first time. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen because we are at the end of our live. And so now it is time to take questions. If anyone has any questions about what we just read, if anybody has any questions about spiritism, spiritualism, espiritismo, now would be the time to ask those questions while I take a water break. Ugh, sinuses. Okay, well then how are we doing tonight? How did everyone feel about this chapter or these chapters? Um Good. So Ramona says, I was just informed that I am an espiritista. Where is a good place to start? I had a reading. Okay. Okay. So I, I don't really know how. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know how that happens. You're not just born an espiritista. An espiritista is a practice. You could be, they might have meant that you have mediumistic abilities, meaning that you have the ability to communicate with the dead. That your faculties, that your spiritual faculties are pretty heightened, and that's a good sign, which means that you are a wonderful candidate to be an espiritista. um, and so with that said, the best places that you can go would be to go to an espiritismo centro, or like a group who identifies as an espiritismo group, that you can learn from, and go to misas and spend time with other espiritistas so that you can develop your abilities even more so, right? I also teach classes as well if you're interested. So, in this particular case, if you're brand new to all of this and you really don't know anything about Espiritismo as a whole, but you know that you are a medium and you know that your abilities are pretty serious, then I highly suggest you take my spiritual development course. It is a very intensive course, it lasts about 4 months. It's very, very intense, and it will give you everything you need from, definitions, all the way up to definitions and history, all the way up to, practice, all the way up to being able to attend your first misa and being prepared and ready to attend your first misa. um, that I host those spiritual intensives twice a year because they are intense and they take a lot of energy out of me, and I spend a lot of time doing the research and the work in order to give you the slides and the information that you need that's the most up to date and the most accurate. So I only do it twice a year. We just finished our last semester, so the next semester coming up will be in February. Um, with that said, I also have an apprenticeship program coming in. Now, for the apprenticeship program, I highly suggest you do the spiritual development course first, because the spiritual development course is going to lay the foundation. And then the apprenticeship program will then take it to the next level, where we will learn things like, doing healing and working with our dreams and working with spirits on a much deeper level than just doing misas and just working our faculties. Okay. It basically prepares you for priesthood, if you will. We don't really have that in Espiritismo. We don't have priesthood. We don't even really have godparents. We may have mentors. We may have elder espiritistas that take us under our wing and stuff like that, but there's really no hierarchy in that sense. Once you enter the space of Espiritismo, everyone is equal. Everyone is equal. We're all here for the development of our abilities. We're all here to communicate with spirits. We're all here to obtain light and progress, and we are all here to heal. So, with that said, the apprenticeship program is less about, you know, hierarchy and more about just preparing you to be the best espiritista that you can be, right? So that's what I can offer. And if you need that information, just go to my website, www.themagicalsolution.com. That's magical with a CK, and just check out that information. Okay. Um, any advice for places in Texas? Okay, so in Texas, who do I know in Texas? Who do I know in Texas? I feel like I do know somebody in Texas that might be able to help you. If you can just give me some time, send me a DM just to remind me who you are, and remind me that you live in Texas. And I'm going to go back to my notes, because I could have sworn I know someone in Texas that's really, really, really good. And for some weird reason, their name is escaping me. um, but yeah, I will get that to you as soon as I find it. I'll get that to you. But good job asking the questions. Um, I think it's important, when you finally figure out what you got going on, and you finally make the commitment to say, I want to do the thing. It's a it's a beautiful process. It's a beautiful process for you, and I wish you whether you do that process with me or with someone else, regardless, I wish you the best, because Spiritismo and being in a space that I such a blessing. It's a blessing, to be able to do things that we can do, to be able to serve people in the way we can serve them. It's just dope, so dope. And you find that's who you are and that's who you want to be, there's no stopping you. There really isn't. Anybody else? Any other questions? Anytime, Ramona. Anytime, honey. By the way, one of my dear friends is named Ramona, and I will forever have such a soft spot in my heart for that name. So, yes. Yes to you. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, or if you think of a question later on, maybe you're marinating on the information and you say to yourself, oh, wait, I do have a question. Feel free to message me on any of the social media platforms. Although I highly recommend that if you want to get an immediate answer, to just send me a message on my website, because I have too many social media outlets. I get too many messages, and your girl I can't keep up with it. So if you can go to my website and just send me a contact form or send me an email, it's magicalsolution@gmail. You'll get a response much more quicker, much more efficiently. I promise. But yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. It's been a pleasure. Make sure you come next Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for the book reading. If you want to get divination done, just like a quick little mini reading, I do mini readings 1 hour prior to the book reading on TikTok and on Instagram. Okay. This particular day, nobody wanted a reading, but we did end up talking about spiritual stuff, which always ends up being fun. So even if you come to the divination and you don't want a reading, but you just want to come and pick my brain for an hour, I am totally yours. All right. So please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It was really great to meet some of you new faces and really amazing to see some of my loyal fans and friends coming on here tonight. Thank you guys so much. And remember, this is how we grow.